Trade is Taiwan's diplomatic currency. With just 12 former allies and China pressuring countries to choose Beijing over Taipei, Taiwan walks a careful balancing act. Along with economic cooperation, it offers know-how, technology, and shared growth, the so-called Taiwan model. Its values-driven diplomacy is built on trade and expertise, not handouts. So how does this strategy work in practice? I'm Divya Gopalan, and you're watching Connected on Taiwan Plus. For a deeper understanding of how Taiwan navigates its formal and informal diplomatic ties, we are joined in the studio by Mandy Liao, an associate professor at the Department of Political Science at National Taiwan University. Thank you very much for coming into our studios.
Thank you, Divya, for your invitation.
Absolutely our pleasure. I'm going to start with a big picture look at what's happening when it comes to diplomatic ties and how Taiwan manages its relations. Now, Taiwan trades expertise and not cash. But how does this stack up against China's checkbook diplomacy? Can it compare and can it hold its allies in the long term?
Okay, so for the initial, actually Taiwan, we have very strong economics. So we try to help and we try to use this way, the economic aid or the technology aid to help with our friends or allies. But the thing is after maybe since 1972, when China has returned to the United Nations to get the permanent membership, then he tried to do something to make Taiwan not existing in international society. And this is when he started to try to use lots of money to buy off our diplomatic states. And that's the reason we start to face the very strong attack on the checkbook diplomacy from China. And so for Taiwan, we have to use other ways. So we have to try to make connection and try to let international society knows we still exist.
Yes. Interesting. Okay, so saying that Taiwan's lost 10 diplomatic allies since 2016, it's at its lowest point. So can expertise sharing alone and this Taiwan model alone hold on to those allies?
Yeah, this is also another thing we are so afraid. Because of the checkbook diplomacy, initially Taiwan, we try to use the same way to fight back. So we start kind of like a bit in a market with China on those, for example, Pacific states or states in Latin America, in Africa. We're trying to do that. But it's not possible. The way it's not possible is because of twofold. One thing is when we try to use the money to buy off the friends again, then China can always bid higher.
Right.
So this is the issue. And another thing is when we try to use the money to give them more foreign affairs by the money's format, then the thing is this will make the corruption issue in those states more serious. So we start to think about that, and then some other friends or some other countries in the Western, they start to say, hey, Taiwan, you cannot do that because you make those states more corrupted. And they just, those officials in those countries, they just say, hey, anyone, if you give me money, I can be friends with you. So it's not a long-term way to make friends with or to maintain our diplomatic ties. That's the reason we start to think about maybe we can help with or we can maintain a relationship from another way. And the way we think of is another advantage of Taiwan, which is the advantage is the technology growth in Taiwan. We have very high level education here, and we set up lots of technology industry here. So we have this advantage, and that's the reason we try to develop expertise or information sharing or technology sharing experience as a Taiwan model, and then to maintain the relationship with our diplomatic states. But the thing is, just like you ask, then can we make sure this can be sustained? I have to say it depends, because one thing is the way we're doing that, and because we have long-term experience and then, engagement with those countries, so they're still very happy in the society or in at least certain part of the government. They are still willing to interact with Taiwan, and they are still very likely to keep a very close relationship with Taiwan. But another part of the government, they would like, quick money.
Right.
So sometimes they will try to, or they will ask the other part of the friends or the domestic party to submit to China's, attraction. But the thing is, when they do that, then at the end, they will find out for the checkbook, sometimes the money will just stay in the checkbook. It's not really come into force. So they will start to, return, or they start to regret their decision at the beginning.
Now, particularly at this moment, Taiwan is part of almost every single global supply chain. And regardless of whether the country that benefits from that supply chain or is on the receiving end is an ally or not a formal ally, tell us how Taiwan can leverage that position it has to build those connections and make sure they can maintain it in the long term.
For that one, right now we are trying to do is because, in East Asia, we have one called like a swallow model of the development, economic development. So we try to use this kind of like a way to help our friends, our diplomatic states. So we will export certain, maybe not so knowledge-intensive industry to the countries to help them to build their own primary industry over there. And also the most important thing is we will try to export the agricultural technology. I think this is more important for our diplomatic states for now, our friends for now, they actually need is to make sure their food security and also help them with another way we do is we export our research, especially the scientific research team, to help them to build their own scientific research center to resist or to research on how to combat the climate change and something else. So this is what we do, and this is also Taiwan's advantage to doing that.
Yeah, on that note, one of the things Taiwan also does is they tailor the kind of expertise that they are offering those countries. Can you give us some examples of what they're doing that is really, really specific to its diplomatic ally, to what that country needs?
Okay, for example, like Palau. So for Palau, we understand at the position they have the national defense, provided by United States. So they don't really need that. But they need another thing is they need to develop their tourism. And they also need people to help them with the fishery industry. So we actually send team to there. And another thing is, I think is Taiwan doing the most successful thing item over there is hospital. So we have our private enterprise like Xinguang Yiyuan. They go there and they help them to establish their hospital system over there. So if you go to Palau and you get sick, you actually get the care is from Taiwan. So this is one very good example that we don't just export, semiconductor. We don't export only like TSMC. We will help the country we will communicate with the country to understand what they need, and we try to use this way to tailor, just like you say, tailor their need, and then to use Taiwan's advantage. Or we will invite the like-minded country, for example, Japan, US, to help together to do these things, to make sure the state, they can feel that the help can be sustainable.
Right. So you mentioned Palau. We interviewed the president of Palau not that long ago and Connected, and the president said, and you mentioned tourism, that China offered to send 1 million visitors a year to Palau. And the president of Palau talked about the issues with that. Can you explain, and you briefly mentioned it earlier, what the strings attached or maybe the risks of China's or dealing with China with their checkbook diplomacy or taking up their offer? What does China expect in return that perhaps Taiwan doesn't expect in return? Like, tell us the difference.
Okay, I can say from 2 points. So the first point, the risk for the China's checkbook diplomacy is sometimes they will give you sign a very big number on the checkbook, and they will promise, just like you mentioned, that they promise, oh, we are going to have maybe like 1 million or over 1 million people to visit your country. But sometimes they just cannot do that. They just give you a wish, but without really implementing. For example, like China and U.S., before at the first term of the Trump, they actually signed a trade agreement on that. But then China didn't even to implement like half of the agreement. That's the reason caused Trump to angry about that. So it's the same. If they cannot really fulfill their agreement to U.S., then how can you expect that China will fulfill his promise to you? So this is the one thing, the risk. And the second thing is, yes, sometimes China will just fulfill the agreement with you, but the thing is the quality. So for example, the airport or the seaport in Sri Lanka, they try to build up. Actually, people start to doubt how long it can sustain because the quality is not so good. For that kind of the checkbook, they always ask it should be the country, the company who build the bridge or who build the seaport. They have to be from China, and then you cannot really control the quality of the construction. So this is one thing. And another thing, take an example of the Palau again, then is when they promise you they are going to give you over 1 million of the tourists to here. But Palau is not so big. How many how can you just allow that many of the people to visit Palau? For example, right now Japan is trying to control the numbers of the China's tourists because they saw the quality already affect the local people's life. Yeah, so I think this is the risk we are facing when China start to write a checkbook. And comparing to Taiwan, we don't really write checkbook right now. We actually write a project with you, with the country together, and to write down, to realize what the local government they really want to do. And another thing is we will see if this kind of a goal is really benefit for the people also. It's not just benefit for the government or for the specific officials, but also for the whole society. Because one thing I think Taiwan trying to do is we don't want, when we try to help a country or when we try to make a friendship with a diplomatic state, they actually don't like us. They actually hate us. So this is what we will do, to write a project together with the country, not just unilaterally to invest or to put something imposed on the countries.
Right, but at the same time, the countries, in question have to also deal with China's threats. Often China does put pressure on a country to choose between Taiwan, recognizing Taiwan, and investments, or even worse, from China. How do countries balance it? And in the end, what we're seeing is a lot of countries are choosing China. So how is Taiwan managing that? And is there anything that Taiwan can do in it, to convince a country we're better for you, or we can give you more?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and this is a very difficult question. For now, we are still trying, and the reason is just like you say. So even some countries, they already, they give up or they just choose China, and then to formally say goodbye. I mean, in a diplomatic way, like give up the ties with Taiwan, but it's in a diplomatic way. But actually, on the table, actually, we still have a very substantial, engagement with each other. So we also don't want to be so rude just to cut off everything when they cut the ties with Taiwan. Although sometimes we have to do that because we have to say, if we don't do that, then people will just, other states will just try to learn from
Play
this.
both.
Yeah, they will just continue to go to China and then also, have their hand under the table to you. So we have to do something to make them choose. And then when they choose China, we have to a certain degree, to punish them. But we still want to be friendly. So the thing is, right now we're trying to do is we try to make our diplomatic states countries, they can be part of like a center for Taiwan. And so, for example, Palau, and as a center, so that we can start to use Palau to bridge our relationship with other countries. But everything will go to Palau first. So that the other Pacific state, they can understand, actually Taiwan is still, we are very dependent dependent on our diplomatic states, our friends. And then you are at the second level, then we will get to you if you need like knowledge about how to resist the rising of the sea land, or you want to know how to make sure your food can have enough like productions for your next year, then you have to come to here, the center, to learn together.
Yeah. So what does Taiwan get out of these relationships, aside from the formal recognition and having a voice at the United Nations? What does Taiwan really get out of these relationships?
I have to say, this is also another very good question, because the thing is, sometimes my students also ask me, what happens if there's no diplomatic countries no diplomatic ties with any country? What happened to Taiwan in that situation? I always say, although we recognize the recognition from our country is quite important for a country, for an independent country. But another thing is how this country can actively as a unit to interact with other countries is also important, especially if Taiwan makes certain important contribution. Just like you say that actually in every global supply, especially for the semiconductor, Taiwan's place is you cannot just dismiss Taiwan. So this is the reason why, for example, the ICAO now trying to, there are some like Canada in ICAO trying to say, hey, we have to let Taiwan in. So even without any like formal diplomatic ties with countries, or even no country formally admit ROC, but with this friends' support, with the international support, then I think we still can be a very independent unit to interact with international society and to attend international organization in a very meaningful way.
All right. So what have we seen then? If we wanted to put it into very specific of how, how Taiwan has, and I know it's hard because when you're talking about diplomacy, it's not a transaction, is it? But what would you say Taiwan has gained most from having these allies, or from having these engagements?
I think the most thing, I still have to go back to the traditional diplomacy, I have to say. The most important thing is that for those countries, they can recognize Taiwan as a country, and then they will have, some support in certain important organizations, for example, United Nations, and they will propose certain bills to support Taiwan or to benefit Taiwan. In case just to avoid, China will try to use any ways to marginal Taiwan. And also we can use their, this channel to those international organizations to submit our opinions. So those Pacific states, for example, Palau is really our very best friends. They were always trying to help to understand what we want to say in certain international issues, and to voice for us, to say, hey, there are some certain points we have to pay attention to, some kind of like international issues we have to face. So I think this kind of like support is quite important. And that's the reason I think it's still, for Taiwan, quite important is to maintain a relationship with those, diplomatic ties countries, because they can voice for us. Yes.
How realistic is the government about not being able to turn things around when it comes to getting formal allies? And if it does actually feel like it's not going to happen anytime soon, what should be done to fill that space?
Okay, so I cannot speak on behalf of my government, but as an international relations scholar, I would say for Taiwan, the best strategy maybe is not to pursue the number of States with the diplomatic ties. But the thing is, how can we try to find a way to show our significance and importance in many international issues? And also, we have to try to act or to make more close relationship with the like-minded countries, for example, the US, Japan, and also how to make those countries understand now it's not just an issue about Taiwan with no country's admission or recognition, but actually it's one independent country that is bullied by another country that make it no existence. So I think this is in the whole international should realize this importance of that, and the influence of China is getting bigger and bigger. And for us, a little state, we cannot really do so many things. We can only do is to try to show our significance. For example, the semiconductor industry, or we can try to persuade the little countries, say, hey, if you need a scientific research, we have very good peoples here, we can help you. But for other thing is, if we look at the big level, then it's more about the struggle, the power struggle between US and China. So we also have tried to persuade those big countries, especially US, Japan maybe, and then try to tell them, it's not only our game or our war with China. It's the Western's ideology, kind of like come back with the communist ideology or authoritarian ideology. If you don't really cherish us, then to the end, all the country will start to choose the side. And then the influence from another camp will be bigger and bigger. And I think it's more like a concernable for US. Yes.